Hello and welcome to Xpandable by Fibonacci X. Xpandable is a series of conversations with operators and investors where we try to demystify the venture building journey. Thank you and subscribe to us. Today we have Vinay Singh from Fireside Ventures with us. Vinay is the co-founder and partner at Fireside Ventures, a venture capital firm that invests in early stage consumer brand. With a background in marketing and entrepreneurship, Vinay has played a key role in growing brands in sectors like food, wellness, and personal care. Before Fireside, he co-founded Stepney, a connected core maintenance platform, and worked at Bank Bazaar and Unilever. Vinay's expertise lies in scaling businesses and supporting startups to reach their full potential. Welcome, Vinay, podcast.
Thanks for having me over.
I always like to ask people about the very beginning. Obviously, your background, as I understood, was more in the marketing in previous roles. That's your topic. But even before that, how was it like growing up? Because I know your life experiences dictate a lot what you do much later in life, right? Where you get at and how you build your career. So maybe some memories or some experiences which have shaped your thinking and which have led to career choices which you made later.
Yeah, I mean, nothing very fantastic about the childhood. It was a very normal childhood. My dad had a transferable job, so I grew up in 5 cities. And towards the end of my schooling, I got really enamored by engineering and design. And what I did not want to do was architecture because one of my uncles was an architect, completely dissuaded me. So I said, what's the next best thing? And I did naval architecture, which was building ships and stuff that is not on land. So, because that was something the family didn't allow. So, after having spent a couple of summer internships, I landed up post my undergrad at Larsen & Toubro. And after about 6 months there, I realized this is not an industry for me. It's highly capital intensive. The only way I can have potentially my own shop here is by having a design consultancy. I can never get into the core industry because it's so capex heavy.
Right.
So that's when I kind of asked some of my seniors and some of my friends, what can I do? How can I switch? And I said, why don't you give the cat? And that's what I did. Ended up at IIM Bangalore, and in the extended family, this was the first kind of like postgrad. So I called up a couple of my dad's friends who had done postgrad. I said, listen, uncle, abhi mil gaya. Where do you think I should do my summer internship? Everybody said, Hindustan Lever mein karna. Achhi company hai. So that's what I tried to do. Fun fact was I went to college and I applied amongst many other companies in the summers. One of the companies I really wanted to get into was Barclays, and they didn't shortlist me. So I went to the placement office and I was very upset, and I said, listen, I have represented my undergrad college in football. I am one of the key members of your football team, very important in the sports fraternity within the college. Why is the only football company not shortlisting me?
Right.
And that's when the placement agency, the placement office of IIM Bangalore said, listen, Barclays is a bank. And I was like, I always thought they were a football company. So that was my knowledge of the corporate world back then. So the second best choice was obviously Hindustan Lever, because that's what uncle said. So that's where I ended up, and I love my summers out there, right? I think a little kid who didn't know much, they just trusted me and threw me into the boondocks of Uttar Pradesh and said, travel 20 towns and cities out there and come back with a plan of how you're going to, make color cosmetics win in that geography. And they had a brand called Lakme. And a lot of young brands like Blue Heaven, Color Bar, etc. were coming up at that point of time. And I fell in love with the consumer industry then, and that as I was finishing up the summer internship, they said, "Would you like to come back?" And I said, "Hell yeah, I would like to come back." So I ended up joining them for about 7-8 years. I was there, did sales, marketing, bunch of brands. That's when in 2012-13 felt super uncomfortable, right? Like I said, मजा आ रहा है, consumer business बना रहे हैं, brand बना रहे हैं, but the real movers and shakers or the inputs of building a brand back then were how much can you distribute and how much reach can you generate through mass media. And big boys game.
Right.
And that's when some of my friends of friends were starting out in consumer internet. Myntra had just raised their Series A, so had Flipkart, so had Ola, so had Urban Ladder, first internet 1.0 companies.
Yeah.
And a handful of these founders I knew either through directly or as a friend of a friend. And so I flew down to Bangalore, spent a week there, talked to a bunch of these guys and said, "Ki kya ho kya raha hai?" And I think at the end of that week, I was convinced that I am going to be a dinosaur as a marketeer if I don't understand this new way of consumer business building, which is not dependent on mass media or mass distribution.
Right.
It is and that carpet bombing big boy approach is not going to work. It has to be that precision rifle shooting, understanding data, targeting, segmentation, audiences, understanding how digital media works and how digital distribution works, which is through e-commerce, through... So I came back and I told my boss at Levers that I want to leave. And they said, "Okay, so where are you going?" I said, "I don't know where I'm going, but I don't want to do this anymore because every one more day I spend here, I'm not adding to my understanding. And you become complacent." And I said, "That is going to really hurt me." So I quit and then talking to a bunch of people. So one of the founders, Adil, who was running Bank Bazaar, he gave me a mandate saying, "Listen, I have a good B2B business doing digital identity verification for lots of banks, and we can now build, based on the same tech, we can build a consumer finance marketplace." And he gave me a very broad mandate of run the entire consumer side of the business. So product growth, performance marketing, all of it. And I said, "Listen, I don't know any of this." And he said, "Yeah, I didn't know technology when I started, so I know you figure it out." So I thank him for taking the chance on me.
Talk to me about when you said you were thrown into different parts of UP learning about. I think that's where these consumer companies are very good at, because some of my colleagues from BCG have gone into P&G, Unilevers, and some of them really enjoy that kind of work, reading the pulse of the masses, going to the ground level, studying the trends, doing the experiments, testing, etc. Right? So that helps you in understanding the pulse of the nation, like what trends are working, what trends are not working.
Yeah, see, I think
it's like bottom up kind of understanding.
Yeah,
right?
Certainly there's no substitute for working the market, meeting consumers in person, having group discussions, etc. But I think sometimes, and this is what has sometimes been a pet gripe of mine, that as a marketeer, the consumer will reflect what stimulus you give to them, right? And therefore, it is if you go out there without a hypothesis, then in general, either you will come back with nothing very insightful, or you will come back with stuff that kind of self-fulfilling prophecy जो होती है कि मतलब मैंने ये सोचा था तो हाँ यही सही है. What really helps me is when I combine that. First, do the data work, create hypotheses, and create like very contrarian points of view to where the market could potentially go, and then use market work, consumer meetings to validate some of that. Because ultimately, real growth, insight, even sharpness in communication development really lies in being able to synthesize weak signals. If it's a strong signal, anyway, the competition will be there, and it will be hard to then you're fighting a who has more capital battle. So for me, I think that combination is really what's helpful. So look at what your distribution data is telling you, look at what your consumption data is telling you, look at what your market share data is telling you, synthesize that into, okay, so if this is what the data is saying, potentially A, B, C could be happening. Okay, now let's pack our bags, go to the market, talk to people, see what's happening in trade, and validate or invalidate one of these three. And if you pick up a fourth one, then you're super lucky. But that happens like lightning doesn't strike every day.
Right.
It's got to be a process.
Yeah, I mean, you touched upon several things. So one was confirmation bias, when you
Right.
already go and you see what's in your mind.
Right.
Second was having different mental models, having second, third level thinking,
Right.
cutting through it and then synthesizing, right?
Right.
Which is not easy to do, because I think when I even look back, maybe I started my career as a research analyst covering public listed companies.
Right.
And when I used to read the financial statement, then listen to the quarterly call, then sit with few people from the company. Early in your career, it's not easy to do. I think it also took me a few years to actually get an egg of it. Like, having those analytical conversations, reading
Right.
between the lines, right?
Right.
And I think venture capital as a field is unique because it's deep in the front end as well as in the back end, right? Other fields like in investment banking and all, right, it depends, like, are you in middle office or front office, or which desk are you running, and your scope is limited. But here, analytically, you go very deep because you're deploying capital. But here at the front end, you're also building relationship, meeting probably 5,000, 10,000 founders in a year, screening through, wading through people. So that way, I think the spectrum is unique to VC.
Yeah, and also I think combined with that, while that is unique, I think our job is easy because we're not deploying very large amounts of capital.
Right.
So we're taking risk with small amounts of capital. The model in which we deploy also is like, you put a small check, work with the company, then see how it's going, and then you can always double down and put a larger check later. So capital at risk you manage through various models of deployment. What's interesting is that you're always kind of looking for what's around the corner and what might not be obvious today. Because if it's obvious, then it's done. Then it's a private equity game.
Right.
And in fact, that's something that we always think about, saying, hey, why is a business model that is heavily validated already in the market, then why should we be backing the 10th or 12th or 15th company that starts off on that business model, right? Because then the first 14 obviously have more capital at play there. So they are going to crush you eventually. Can you build a small business? Of course, India is large enough to have small business everywhere, but that's not the excitement of a VC to build another small business. It's build a large business.
Right.
The question is how can you be a little ahead of time, the analytical part of it, and say, okay, can we take that risk? And if we fail, that's okay. The model allows for it.
Right. But the other side is that at this stage, then the mortality is also much higher, right?
Yeah, I think mortality being high is part of the VC business model, right?
Right.
The trick really is how can you put a scaffolding in place of common pain points that allows for founders to, stumble but not fall, and therefore reduce mortality. And that can, at least in my humble opinion, only happen if there's focus. And if there is one kind of sector you go after, then there are common pain areas that you can build scaffolding for. Whereas if you go for many sectors, then you can't have like a kind of like a support system for very differentiated businesses within the same fund. So I think that potentially can reduce mortality. And in our business, while yes, our model very dispassionately allows for mortality, but it's ultimately a very people business. They're real entrepreneurs building real businesses, and I don't think we want any of our entrepreneurs to fail. So how do you build that scaffolding to reduce mortality? That's a virtuous cycle as well, because if you can do that, then the best entrepreneurs want to work with you, and then as a fund, things start looking good because the virtuous cycle gets kicked in.
Right, that's the value add you're indicating. So that's investment value add and alpha, and that's how you generate extra, right? So after your corporate
Reduce mortality, not
reduce
generate
mortality.
extra.
Yeah, right. Correct. I rephrase that.
Generate extra is always the entrepreneur.
Limiting downside. Right? Let's say that, right? So after Bank Bazaar, you did your own startup. Right?
Yeah. So that was, I think, we built a fairly large business. We raised a Series C.
Okay.
I think we could have built it. I could have spent some more time there, but the entrepreneurial bug had bit me by then. Because if you remember, that's where I had started from all the way back 10 years before that, when I'd written the CAT saying, listen, I want to build something of my own. And so that's what led me to then start Stepney. And this was something that I deeply cared for. If you look at the garage system in India, it's a highly fragmented, unorganized segment. And in most cases, very uneducated people employed and running in this segment. Typically, the stories are very sad, man. Like that industry still employs child labor, kids grow up in garages, and then they don't know anything else. And then once they're 18, 20 years of age, they go and start their own garage. And it's a vicious cycle out there, right? Because they are uneducated, they learn on the job, almost like a vocational training, working in some other garage as a kid, and then they kind of start their own garage, and then because they only know so much, they can only grow so much, and the next generation is pretty much trapped in that poverty trap. We said, what can we do here? Obviously, in my free time, me and my friends were petrol heads back then, still are with the limited time we have. So, loved cars. And we used to kind of like mess around with the ECUs, the electronic control units, to see how we can change performance metrics of the car without really touching the mechanics of it, right? So, air-fuel ratios, compression ratios, fuel pressures, all of it can be controlled. That's how you get your, in your cars of the modern day cars, you get sports mode and eco mode and all that. But back then there was no sports mode and eco mode in cars, but this is how it happens. So we were messing around with it and said, hey, if we can write data into the ECU, we can read data from the ECU as well. And all the errors that are occurring, etc., we can have some kind of a, back then it was a statistical model. आज के दिन अगर करते तो उसको AI बुलाते हम लोग.
Right.
But हम लोग back then what we were doing was we were just doing statistical analysis, saying कि out of the last 100 Hyundai i10s of 2014 vintage, what are the most common problems.
Right.
तो उधर तक तो पहुंच गए थे हम, because if you give your readers to enough garages, they will do enough scanning to get you that data. But वो common problem का सबसे common repair क्या था, वो loop पूरा नहीं हो रहा था. So we started asking garages to feed that back, and we started incentivizing them. Then we said कि अच्छा ठीक है, आप scanning free में कर लो. And typically to scan a car, these garages used to call a specific scanner guy who used to charge them 500-600 rupees. It was a massive thing for them to say कि यार scanner free मिल रहा है. We started getting a lot of data, both on what are common issues with cars by make, model, year, etc., and what are the common ways to solve it also, because the garages were then, because we put a garage kind of billing software, CRM software, all bundled into one, like a Practo for garages, right? And so because of that, we could then close the loop out. So think about it, for someone who now grew up in a garage where he had a lot of experience with Tata cars, and now is 25 years of age, has his own garage. Before Stepney, if let's say a Volkswagen came into his garage, would spend 3 days just diagnosing the issue, because he doesn't have the experience of it. But now he had the power in his hand of having the same experience as a Volkswagen master would. because
Right.
it just has the largest data set of all issues a Volkswagen could potentially have of that age and make model for a certain error code, and what are the top 3 reasons why that happens. So out of 100 man-hours somebody spends on cars they've never dealt with before, 75 of them are spent on diagnosing the issue. That's gone. His productivity goes up, his ability to earn goes up, and his ability to either have a bigger garage or get out of that poverty cycle goes up.
Right.
So that was the purpose with which we started that. We scaled it up. In fact, then the garages came back and said, listen, just these services are not good enough. Can you give us customers as well? We said, sure. So we built a service marketplace on top of that. We ran that in Bangalore, in Delhi. Rest of the cities, it was just the services. And then in 2016, a bunch of players came calling, and we then decided to partner with Quicker. So June 2016 is when we got acquired, and I worked with them over the next 6 months to integrate it into their cars platform as both used car diagnostics and then the LTV of the customers after that for services.
Right.
Yeah, and then at the end of the year, when I finished my earnout, I kind of looked back and said, okay, I've learned something about technology, digital, feeling not like a dinosaur, maybe somewhere in the middle, like a, I don't know, woolly mammoth or something. But thoda evolution to hua hai.
Right.
So I said, कि ठीक है, अभी देखते हैं how we can apply this back to the business of building brands. And then that's when we started Fireside in 2017.
2017. Right. What were your 2 or 3 takeaways from that entrepreneurship stint? Like if you were to just, summarize, like these are the 3 things which I learned. Or mistakes or learnings.
यार एक तो बहुत lonely journey है, बहुत ही lonely है, and like it is full of self-doubt. And no matter who you are, how much you have achieved in your life, I think that question of self-doubt, that question of now suddenly this the same people who would like you would never have to go to their office to meet them. They would come and meet you. You go to their office, you wait in the waiting room, and they still won't meet you. Right? That humbling experience, right? Oh, when your self-worth is based on you and not the kursi that you occupy,
yes,
or the title that you have. I think it's a humbling experience. It's lonely because we take our organizations for granted in the sense that all of us have done this at some point of time. And when we work, if we have worked in a large corporate, at that chai ki dukan, at that nukkad below this thing, there'll be some crib session that will go on, etc.
Yeah.
But I think the value of a corporate is whenever you're stuck, you have so much of support around you, whether it's in our world, in consumer, you're a supply chain guy, you're a finance guy, you're a boss who you can talk to in marketing, you're a sales guy. So you have a lot of people to talk to and sort out issues.
Right.
Whereas in a startup, it just you are it. Right, you're it. And the fact is that the people building startups, and it's hard to only do it once you have been on the other side. There's a lot of sacrifice, man, that every founder is doing, and they are kind of making very conscious choices to dedicate their time to building an enterprise. And that's coming at the cost of them not being able to spend time with their parents who are not getting any younger. It's coming at the cost of time with their kids who will not be the same age, and the cost of their time with their partners as well, right? And obviously their friends, etc. So they are actually so every relationship it's like a piggy bank. The more time you put, the more richer it becomes, and then you can extract. One day when it becomes rich enough, you can take it out and do something good with that relationship. And the less time you spend, it's a leaky piggy bank. It keeps leaking, and relationships become turn sour. So it comes at that cost. And I think just knowing that each of my entrepreneurs is going through that and more perhaps, but at least this, I think it's at least for that was one of the founding principles of Fireside, right? Saying, "Ki yaar boss, how can we co-build alongside our founders?" It is always a relationship where we are uh, trying to be helpful, not assessing, not judging, and things that are very unique to the company, very unique to the customer, the product the startup is serving. Of course, founder will have to build that, but things that are common pain points, the scaffolding that I referred to,
Right.
how can we help with that? And if we have to co-build alongside founders, then we have to have the power of focus. And let's not try and build a fund that has, I'm a sector agnostic fund, or let's not do that. There is a power in kind of being concentrated and then going deep and building those capabilities.
Right. So, what I heard is you have empathy for founders because you've gone through similar kind of situations. You understand what it takes, basically, right?
I hope I do.
Right. This is one side, right? Second was that you need to work on your self-esteem while you're going through hardships because it comes from within, not to the position you hold in your previous role, etc.
Right.
Because people will not give you time, etc., etc. Right. So that's interesting. But how do you balance, because you're also an investor, right? Empathy versus, let's say, a company going through a rough phase, right? And you need to nudge the founder to do more of what he's doing, or to shift his focus, or to pivot, or whatever that situation calls for, various situation. And sometimes um, because the founder is caught up operationally so much, right? That outsider view is only coming when people are sitting down with you and showing you, okay, this is your blind spot, or this is the other perspective of looking at the same problem, right? So how do you nudge that? How do you balance that empathy, and you still need to nudge and be, careful that you don't burn the bridge, etc.
I think honesty and transparency. The fact that we are a VC and our model allows for impairment. So having that maturity of sitting on the table and saying, here, we are equals building this together, firstly, right? You allowed me to be a part of your journey, and I think it was a fair deal, the amount of equity you gave me for the cash I gave you. So as long as you are not, we don't get into partnerships where we feel that the input, valuation is too high, because then we'll always feel that we got a raw deal. It has to be a fair deal. We don't get into relationships where we believe that, the founder should build X, but the founder is building Y. So those are conversations we have before our first investment. Saying, okay, why is this space exciting? How are you segmenting the consumer? Which is the underserved consumer persona? What is your source of growth? What is the product, therefore the product differential that they are looking for? How much of pricing are they willing to pay? How much is it going to cost you to buy these consumers from Facebook and Google? Is your economics going to work out? How you balance all of this? So those are conversations that we're anyway having as part of the diligence process, right? So the day of the check, things are already kind of, we said, okay, these are aligned. There are some unknowns, which we're taking the risk and we'll find out together.
Right.
Some new categories that you want to launch, some new price points you want to launch. As long as we both know the risk that we're taking together, we do it together.
Right.
And there are some unknowns. Saying, अच्छा ये क्या Q-commerce पे चलेगा? Will this work on when you go offline as well? Those we don't know. And each step of the way, I think just be honest and transparent, saying कि यार, we think this is working. We think this is not working. Why do we think so? What is the external benchmark? That's the breadth of value that we can add to the portfolio, to the founder. Saying, यार अगर आप food में कुछ बना रहे हो, यार 10 other food brands you have worked with at your scale, these were the things that we were seeing. This is how you are. So how do we kind of evaluate ourselves, use the bandwidth of our team, because the founder doesn't have bandwidth. In the early days, they're very lonely. They don't have an organization around them. That's when the funds can play a big role of expanding their bandwidth. कुछ competitive analysis करनी है, कुछ for example channel analysis करनी है, market research करना है. All that our team can help them out with.
Right.
And come back with facts on the table. Saying, here is our last 10 portfolio companies. They might not be equivalent to you because we don't do competing investments, but in the same food and beverage space. But in your space, here is what we know about the competition. Here's what the channels are telling us. Here's what the consumers are telling us. What do you think? How can we do things differently if things are going... And every company will go through its ups and downs, right? Idea is always to find a solution to the problem. I mean, founder will not... and operate from a very, high degree of trust framework here. We spend a lot of time before investing with our founders because we know that it's a 10-year journey with them. So we have to have a high degree of trust relationship with them. So why will a founder knowingly, with the best of her or his knowledge, not do a great job? The fact is that the founder is also frustrated that numbers are not coming through, either growth is not happening, or burn is very high. Some issue is there. Founder is aware of the issue. Founder maybe doesn't have a pulse on what is the root cause of the issue, or what is the solution to the root cause. Maybe one of those is an issue. So that's what we work with them on, to try and get to that. And sometimes, there are cases in the past when founders have run out of runway. In the pursuit of finding these, we try and be as supportive as possible with capital. We have done bridges in the past. We've used our network to get them additional capital if required, if there's a bridge to something.
Right.
But there have been impairments in the past. I think as long as you have a very honest conversation saying, listen, this is the last check that I can write from this fund into your company. Let's use this to find the answers. After this, I cannot write anymore. As long as you are very honest and transparent about saying, hey, we only have enough capital to do 3 more experiments out of 5 that we want to do. Let's see what we want to prioritize. I think founders are also matured about it. I think ultimately, if things don't work out, it's okay. I mean, a lot of it is market timing, right? Like, you might have a view on where the consumer is going, but India Mart didn't work out, but Flipkart worked out, right? Market timing is a huge. Meru didn't work, Ola worked. So that has such a huge role to play in the success. So how can market forces also? It is a moving consumer. Founder, yes, is responsible for the success of the company. Whereas, I think there's this saying, right? Success has many fathers. I think failure should have many mothers as well. And unfortunately, when it comes to failure, everybody they tear the chit on the founder, and fair enough. I mean, he took it up, or she took it upon herself to build a company, and they're responsible to see the company through. But there are externalities that sometimes are not in their hands.
Yeah, timing, also known as luck.
Yeah, and if it's execution issues, also be transparent and honest, right? Saying, listen, don't think you're executing well. It's not a market timing issue. It's just that you're not discoverable on marketplaces. Here is your search rank versus the others. Or the problem might be that you're not available. Or your supply chain efficiency is not great, therefore your, OTIF isn't great. And call that out and say, listen, as compared to other people in your domain or in other similar companies, this is what we've seen and it's not working. And how do we fix it? Maybe there's a team member that needs to be added. Maybe there's an advisor that you need to get on board to set up a framework. Maybe there's a new system you need to adopt. The solutions could be many, and we are happy to work through the solutions. But see, it is harmful even to the founder if you just have a happy relationship. You need to be absolutely brutally honest, but you don't need to be nasty about it. I'm saying, ऐसा नहीं है कि मतलब if one company doesn't work, मतलब the world will explode, right? Neither for the founder nor for you. Founder go and do another business.
Right.
And you can move on to other portfolio companies also. But as long as you're working together, at least have fun while doing it.
Right. So so one of the important takeaway for me was that you need to trust that person. You should be comfortable trusting him
Deeply.
So now in these conversations, when you're screening, doing the diligence, how do you identify that? Like, can I trust this person? And what are the other traits in addition to the trust? Because trust is one of the things, but you may be looking at other, let's say, execution capability. Is he a good team builder? Is he a good team player? Other aspects.
See, we live in a connected world.
Right.
I think 2 degrees of separation from everyone around us.
Correct.
Maybe 3 if that's so. It's easy to get some references. I find it very enlightening to talk to people who have reported to the founder in their previous life. I find those conversations to be most enlightening. Because ultimately, any company that has to get built will have to get built on the ability of the founder to build a large team and inspire a large team. And if they've not been be able to inspire people that have reported to them in their past, then why will it happen now? The question, right? So that helps.
Have you ever been proven wrong with this framework? Like, you've had a negative feedback and the founder turned out to be successful later? Or you never pick up a person like who has a negative feedback from the team members?
Yeah, so I was looking at my anti-portfolio and saying, I didn't pick them, and then did somebody become big? No, I can't think of something that jumps out. Maybe there is, but I can't think of something that jumps out. I think I try, at least before writing the second check, which is the larger check and the larger capital at risk, I try and really get to know the person. So after writing the first check also, capital at play in our model is lower. So we have the ability to work alongside the founder, observing them, seeing how they're building. I think that's a big learning curve for us. But if your question was specifically around the first check, I think, there is a little bit of an art to venture investing that I can't take away from it, right? You can put as much science as you want. But एक ना founder की फितरत होती है जो आप, by the way, Zoom पे मैं invest नहीं करता. All of 2020 I made 0 investments.
Really?
0. Right? मैं नहीं कर सकता Zoom में invest. मेरे से तो नहीं होता. I will have to fly down. I don't mind flying down, but I have to spend half a day and meet a person in person. I think there's so much of communication in body language, in not what people say, but how they say it. That will give you a lot of indications. And I think that only comes alive when I'm in the room with the person. Okay. There's a vibe aspect to it.
Right.
But I think ref checks have really helped. My ability to trust them also comes from the biggest one for me is why.
Why do this?
Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to your family? Why are you doing this to your parents? Why are you doing this to your kids? You're going to be an absent father, an absent son or daughter, or an absent partner. Why are you doing this? And I think the answer to those questions, right, not only help understand the person, but in many cases also help build compelling brands, because founder-led brands, the personality of the founder will bleed itself into its brand eventually. And that why will find its way into how the brand gets built at some point of time. So it's not only a decision of who you're backing, but what you're backing as well. The answer to that question.
Especially in D2C.
In brands. I only know brands, boss.
Only.
I don't know anything else.
Okay. What would be some of the red flags if we follow the theory of inversion? Like, what would you want? You will select for high trust. Why you have a strong reason to do this? But if you were to reject, like, what would be the?
See, I think over-capitalization. If somebody is trying to raise a very large amount without a very clear justification for why he or she needs that, I think always scares me. Because no matter how much money you have in the bank and how disciplined you want to be, when there's that large check sitting in the bank, I think your team members or your other advisors, your partners will eventually put so much pressure in you that frugal DNA will change and bad habits will set in. So for me, unjustified just because somebody is ready to cut a check to you, raising large amounts ahead of time is scary.
So having too much capital is an issue.
It's an issue. It's an issue because then suddenly, basic principles of frugality get thrown out of the window. Basic principles of saying ki cost bachao, gross margin banao, CM2 positive try karo, working capital conserve karo, all those things go out of the window. And then, in the narrative of go big or go home, everything is everything is allowed. And that seldom, see, we are not in the business of backing network oriented businesses or winner take it all categories, etc. So there's no justification for capital as a moat at this point.
Yeah.
Right. So, and especially at the early stage you're trying to prove something, prove PMF. You're not saying Acha, now that I have PMF, I want to be the winner in the category. I think that time comes later in the journey, if at all. Brands mein kabhi nahi aata hai in many cases. But that's certainly a red flag for me. I think
also that indicates they don't value equity. I mean, in a way, right? Because if you're, depends because they can value equity by valuation. Yeah.
So I think that's one. I think the second one is founder setting up a very high powered team upfront without having some market feedback herself or himself.
Yeah.
And
most of them are usually not full time. Usually when I meet them, they're giving just limited time, but it's like very loaded pitch deck. Like you see it, it's like
So part time though you can call out very easily.
Right,
but I'm saying even if they raise some capital or if they're going to raise some capital and saying we're putting this high powered team together, I think see there is a real role for subject matter experts in startups, but that comes at a time when they are required. We've reached a scale where now getting a supply chain expert can bring down 400-500 bips of margin saving into the company. Then by all means get the best supply chain person to help you with that, right? But get to that scale first. I think one of the founders actually told me this, which has stayed with me, right? You're not a founder till you have your first 500 customers names and numbers on your own phone. Till they have been able to give you direct feedback, you have been able to pick up the phone and talk to your customer. Now, 500 is just a number, it could be whatever, right?
Right.
But your early customers and being very intimate with them to understand, do you like what I gave you, what you didn't like, what you liked, what can I do better, packaging, and getting into the minutiae of it. Saying what was the unboxing experience like, delivery timeline kitne mein tha. All these add up to customer experience, right?
Yeah.
When you first used it, what was the sensorial like? After 7 days of using, after 10 days of using, after 30 days of using, what are you feeling like? Will you refer me to your friends? Can you give me 5 of your friends' referrals? The founder is not looking to get some quick business going by doing this.
Right.
They're actually trying to test a model. कि ये at scale काम करेगा कि नहीं करेगा. So till that intimacy doesn't happen by the founders themselves, one of them, I think it's a red flag. I think it certainly is a red flag.
So Paul Graham from Y Combinator runs a blog, paulgraham.com. So he has an essay which he posted, I think, roughly 6-7 months back. It's called Founder Mode.
Right. Of course.
It's a short essay. You must have seen it on LinkedIn.
Of course.
Right. Around Diwali time it came around last year, right? So
सब लोग founder mode पे चले गए थे उसके बाद.
like modular approach to building versus, and that was the exact point, right? You can't think of building the org of a startup like you're building a corporate team. Yeah, you can't put top heavy team and then expect things will work by their own, and you're going to pump money into the system and things are going to get built. It doesn't work. I think the first few years it's you, and then there is few very, very junior people, and you have to get comfortable working with them.
Execution bandwidth, of course, you want people around you, but certainly this one. In fact, the other red flag on the other side, by the way, now this is interesting, is that while this is in the early stage, if a founder who has built, let's say, a 50 crore business is then at that point not hiring functional experts, that's a red flag at that point of time. Because now the question is, are you able to let go? Are you able to empower people? Are you able to delegate? So at various stages of evolution, I think the assessment, it's hard being a founder, right? Because now you're asking the founder to say, "Acha, tera individual contribution ka time ho gaya. Now can you become a CEO?" That question comes then.
Right.
So I think it's at what stage of the startup you are coming in as an investor, but I was answering it more from the early perspective, 0 to 1 perspective.
Right. And one of the founders who has, his business is bootstrapped. We happen to be friends. They're probably doing $20 million in revenue. They're in the information business. So I was just discussing with him, like, how did you manage to build it bootstrapped as a solo founder? And he said, I look at it like a video game. So every stage it's like, what next? And how can I switch gears? Because in the beginning it was like 5 of us, and then I had to bring in like chief of product, head of product, and head of this and this. And now I'm like to the next stage. How can I be hands off, and how can I let the culture grow bottom up?
Right.
These people, my involvement in culture goes down as the team gets top heavy. So there was also an interesting analogy, like people who play video games, it's like different stages. It's like an infinite game. It's just the next stage, getting ready.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
What are some of the most important questions you ask founders when you meet them? Let's say when you are screening, like why is obviously one of the questions which you ask. Why do this to yourself? Then what else would you ask them?
I don't know if they're important or not here. I think you should call some founders and ask them that question. We, as investors sometimes try to justify our importance in the whole system. So that's a henny. But what I'm curious about is कि सब founders ना मतलब again this is very specific to brands. They come in with a lot of gusto about why their brand and their positioning and everything is the next best thing since sliced bread, and all you need to do is put some money into Meta and say it's going to go crazy. And they have obviously some initial customers, and obviously there's some excitement, etc. The question I'm curious about is saying ki, great, you got some early adopters, that's fine. And there's a chasm between, early adopters and early majority. We all know about that. Now, in the early majority, the consumers who are sitting in that cohort, they are not as excited about your category as the early adopters were. For example, let's take something like cat food. Right? Now, they are consumers who are in love with their cats. They are cat parents.
Right.
And then they will go very deep into understanding ki acha cat food mein kya nutrition ja raha hai. My cat will get what kind of product. Is this human grade food or is it some very bad animal parts? And so therefore they are that early adopter cat parent who's very excited about the category. And therefore she'll try you, she'll buy you, she'll... Then there's cat owner. Cat parent, cat owner. Cat owner is majority. Where there's a cat in the house, yeah, you are somewhere, yes. And especially the cat might be your daughter's, but as a mother who's buying the grocery of the house, you're not as connected to the category as your daughter is.
Correct.
And so she'll buy. So, for example, in the home cleaning space, there could be people who have this clean phobia, that they want to keep cleaning stuff, and therefore they'll be very excited about buying different kind of products for different services. एक मिरर क्लीनर होगा, एक टैप क्लीनर होगा, एक वुड क्लीनर होगा, एक सर्विस क्लीनर होगा, एक टॉयलेट क्लीनर होगा, एक गैस क्लीनर होगा. They'll have all of that. And those are your early adopters. They're very excited about the category. And then you have your early majority who they just want a cleaner. They give it to their maid, or they don't want to run out of it. That is the involvement with the category. Now imagine when you have to go from that early adopters to early majority, and that chasm comes in front of you. What I'm curious about at that point of time is saying that chalo, somebody buys your brand. Now they have made an unsafe choice. The safe choice was to go and buy a Wishka's cat food. Nobody complains. It's a good cat food, or Royal Canin.
Established brand.
Or if you're in the cleaning space, let's say your surface cleaners, you can buy, let's say, a Lysol. And if you're in the toilet cleaner space, a Harpic, it's a safe choice. Nobody's losing their job, or nobody's going to get questioned for that.
Correct.
But that consumer made an unsafe choice. Like, she went out of the Bhedchal and bought your brand. Now she brought your brand home. And now she has 5 skeptics around her. One will be a skeptic neighborhood auntie. One will be maybe her mother or mother-in-law. One will be maybe some chachi who doesn't like her life choices. One will be maybe her brother who generally wants to irritate her. And all of them will ask that question. कि ये क्या खरीद के ले आए? इतने पैसे क्यों दे इसके? India is a country where not only price sensitive, yaar, they are a country which is very open to giving opinions. Everybody has an opinion about everything in everybody's life. Unsolicited opinions. So how does your brand and your positioning and your functional benefits help that girl, that poor girl, or that poor guy who went out of the way to buy your brand, justify his or her purchase to a skeptic social jury? I'm always curious about that, because, and if founders can answer that, then the excitement to build that with them is very high. It's very, very high. Because then you are building something which can be either a category creator, or you're building something that can be a category disruptor, or you're building something that is a genuine white space that incumbents have left out. There is an underserved consumer who is making suboptimal choices.
So founder in that case has a inflection about future, that this is how this will work out, or this is how a consumer will explain it to other people.
Or this is how my current early adopters are also justifying their purchase. Just an observation.
Early adopters, okay.
It could be either of the above.
But when it moves to majority, does that explanation hold?
When it goes to the early majority, it may or may not hold, and that's fine. But the fact is that you have built a very strong foundation. A foundation where, again, in India, we are, like you said, a very value conscious nation, culturally speaking.
Yeah.
Imagine, let's say that you buy this shirt, and it is not a branded shirt or a incumbent branded shirt like Louis Philippe or Allen Solly. Let's say your chacha or your phupha or your neighbor says, "ये कौन सा shirt लेके आ गया? बड़ी wrinkly सी लग रही." Right? And if your answer is, "नहीं जी, ये तो ऋतिक रोशन ने इश्तिहार किया है," how stupid will you look? Right? How stupid are you going to look?
Right.
Now, what you have done there is you have shown your emotion to your social jury and said that I made an irrational choice. And that is not respected in India. In India, rational choices are respected. And a rational choice will always be rooted in a functional benefit. Now, let's say you bought this shirt, that same Fupa came and I said, ki, yaar, kya should we do? And you say, ki, yaar, आपको पता है इसमें 1000 thread count है और 3 degree cooler लगता है मेरे को. Something like that. Now that is a rational explanation for your behavior.
Yeah, 1+1 offer tha.
That could also be a rational. But see, brands don't get built on offers.
Yeah, brands.
That's one of the toolkits in brand building. It
Right.
cannot be the foundation of a brand. वो 1+1 offer में लेके फिर बोलेगा शर्ट में 3 degree cooler आता है या 1000 thread count है. Now, the moment you say that, you have shown how smart you are to that skeptic social jury and said कि हाँ यार देखो आपको भी खरीदना चाहिए. That's when referral starts happening. That's when brands start getting built. Right? Now, the fact is that by the time you get to the early majority, this is so ingrained in the brand's narrative. Whether it's on the packaging, whether it's inside the store, on the website, on the A+ content on Amazon, or wherever it is, right? That the brand might not even have to talk about it. The fact that it keeps you 3 degrees cooler is well understood by everyone, and the brand has now gone to emotional benefits and advertising and communication, which is saying, okay, now that customers of my brand are 3 degrees cooler, what can they do with that? They can make cool decisions in meeting rooms. They can be cool while playing a sport and therefore play it better. They can be cool and work harder in the hot environment of tropical India, blah, 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 which are very emotional positions for brands to take, and brands get built on emotional positions, but built on a foundation that is always functional, because that allows you justification. So that scales over time.
The only time I've seen this thread count thing, especially to my parents, when they go and buy, I went with them to buy bedsheets. So let's say Maspers or Home Store or some other brand, and they're always explaining, and I think parents usually have that puzzle because they don't really know, like, some of them, like my parents don't know, like, what is it, 8,000 thread count in bedsheet.
More is more. More is better.
Probably that's the assumption. I don't think they know, like, what is
the difference between 8,000 and 3,000. If you ask them, they don't know. But 8,000 certainly sounds better than 3,000, right?
But that's a good way. Now I get where this is like built or ingrained into like foundation of consumer psychology. Like, so probably the salesperson also gets that training. Like, talk about
absolutely
this. Talk about this.
Absolutely. So, for example, Lakme, for example, says that my lipstick is 9 to 5 all day, blah blah blah. That's the communication, and the communication is just about like you don't need to keep doing a touch up, so you can go about your day. That's the communication for the lipstick. The product truth about that is it's got XYZ ingredients that are anti-smudge proof, anti-transfer proof, etc., that allow for the lipstick to last for all day. That's the training given to the BA. So when the customer goes to the BA counter, what she has seen on a YouTube or an Instagram or on TV is, apply the lipstick once and it will last all day. What the BA is telling her is why. So the story continues and
reinforced continuation. Yeah. So what are some of the common mistakes, especially during the 0 to 1 journey, which you notice founders making? Maybe after they've received a little bit of funding, or maybe before that. So let's assume they passed all the tests, like they're high trust, they're fine, everything is check. And now what are the mistakes they could make?
See, one is that balance between being perseverant and being flexible and empathetic to your consumer. I think that certainly is a kind of like a mistake if you're too pig-headed about being just perseverant, trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, saying ये product है अब यही बेचूंगा मैं. And then I tried customer segment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm looking at customer segment 18, 19, 20 and not realizing कि it's not working. Yeah, it is good to take that product and say कि अच्छा customer segment 1 or 2 के साथ काम नहीं किया, चाहे 3, 4 से काम कर जाएगा. But that balance of saying at which segment do I say कि अच्छा do I need to go and reformulate my product? Right, that balance sometimes is very important for, and I only think a founder can perceive it because only he or she has that everyday interaction with the customer to be able to understand कि नहीं यार ये मेरा टाइप का कस्टमर नहीं है, ये मेरा टाइप का कस्टमर नहीं है, इसको ये समझेगा वर्सेस सेइंग कि नहीं यार ये प्रोडक्ट ही मैं जाके रिफॉर्मुलेट करके फिर से लॉन्च करता हूँ. वो कस्टमर सेगमेंट 3 करेक्ट था.
Going back to square one.
And then launching a new product. Second one is, I think, not innovating enough. Saying कि
fearful?
No, just saying that कि मैंने एक product बना लिया है, अब मैं यही बेचूंगा, and it might be selling. But the biggest cost of building brands today is customer acquisition cost.
Right.
And once you've acquired the customer, what's your land and expand strategy, right? How else can you service that customer once he's in your franchise? You need more product for that. You can't say that एक product लेगा हो गया. So it is important that they build a high velocity NPD engine upfront. Otherwise, what might happen is they will not have enough product to sell to each customer that they acquire, and their overall economics will start unraveling over time. Because CAC keeps going up.
Right.
The fallacy that most founders have is they think with scale CAC will come down. No, it doesn't. It keeps scaling with scale. the only salvation is retention at the end of the day. So that's one. The second one is not being able to institutionalize consumer insight. Right. What I mean by that is founders start companies based on gut instinct. And they must have talked to like 10,000 customers, 5,000 customers, whatever it is, right? And started a company based on some insight. Either it was a personal issue that happened in their life, or they saw it with friends, family, or they just did some top-down market research and actually went and validated it on the ground. Either way, they've come with an insight and they started a company. The point is कि in the initial days, it is okay to be running with your gut and saying कि हाँ यार मेरे को मेरा customer समझ आता है, इसको ऐसे लॉन्च कर देंगे या ये प्रोडक्ट लॉन्च कर देंगे या कस्टमर को कंपटीशन में ये पसंद नहीं आ रहा था तो इसको ऐसे चेंज करके लॉन्च कर देंगे. बट हाउ डू यू गेट दैट कंज्यूमर इनसाइट टू बी इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज्ड एंड डेटा ड्रिवन, एंड हाउ डू यू गेट डिसीजंस टू बिकम डेटा ड्रिवन इन योर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन एंड नॉट ड्रिवन बाय an attitude which is my way or the highway, and be open enough to being challenged on your own beliefs by the data. I think that's very important because otherwise false positives start happening. वो confirmation bias starts happening. Third one is in our world, thinking of brand building as communication development. It's not. Brand is a mix of 6 P's. There's product, there's packaging, there's pricing, there's proposition, there's place, there's promotion. All of it have to sync together. And if one is out of sync with the other, the consumer doesn't get the consistent experience of the brand. And the bedrock of early stage brand building is great product, great buying experience, including post-purchase delivery experience, post-use customer service experience, unboxing experience. The second one is the packaging, both primary, secondary, tertiary. Third one is pricing, of course. These 3 have to come together at the very early stage. And then you can build proposition, promotion over time. Place is about distribution that will happen over time. But this is the fundamental, right? If you don't get product, packaging, pricing, customer experience right, you're not going to build a brand. And spending on money on the top of the funnel before you've got all these basics right also is bad for business because you don't have a good conversion mechanism and you've opened the mouth of the funnel.
Yeah, so they will have bad experience.
And it'll be leaky.
And would you say these are also some of the signs when you say there is early traction, but the brand might not work? You could see some of these signs are not falling into place.
See, not having high velocity NPD is an execution issue. You can always fix that. Right? It's about putting a process in place. It's about getting the right partnerships in place, maybe some team members, maybe some advisors. It's an execution issue. Consumer insight and institutionalization of that is a culture issue. Right? It stems from, all culture in every company stems from the founder, and it's a culture issue. If that cannot get institutionalized. And to me, CX and early brand building through product pricing and packaging and being iterative about it is an empathy issue. Either you're empathetic and you really want to solve the problem, or you're a square peg round hole person saying my way or the highway. So early on, you will understand whether the founder is in a position to execute on all of this, is in a position to be vulnerable, both with her or his founders and her or his team, which is on the CICX piece. And I think if those boxes are ticked, I think that exploration itself gets founders off to their first, growth journey and ready for the next check.
Right. One of the themes which I wanted to discuss with you, because this year we are largely working with a lot of consumer brands, as banking, travel, pet care. These are some of the things which we are touching. Differentiation, especially at the accelerator stage, that's where we struggle. Like, how should founders think about differentiation in these markets when they are coming as a new brand, right?
Yeah.
Because they have limited manpower, they have limited capital, they have limited mental bandwidth to actually sit down and do it, because they're surviving against the odds, and then every day is a struggle, and they don't have that time to zoom out, and maybe it's their own savings they're putting in. They're not funded usually when we start working with them. Typically 50 lakhs to 1 CR of ARR. So and differentiation is a real challenge, right? Because it breaks into your story. Let's say you're going for a seed round. Everybody wants to hear about, okay, how are you different?
Yeah.
That's the first question.
Yeah.
So break down, I want you to break down, like, because you have so much experience on the branding side, how should founders think about it? What are some of the mental models they can use to do like a stripped down version of differentiation, or how to even think about it?
Yeah. So I think this is a fairly common problem statement, right? A lot of founders we work with who are doing not maybe 50 lakh 1 crore a year, but maybe 50 lakh 1 crore a month also still haven't figured it out fully. I think the one intervention that we found helpful is give the founder a long road. 30 days, 180 days, 90 days, 180 days, 3 months, 6 months, jitna bhi time chahiye unko. But just there's a chart that we work with them on, saying that, listen, at the end of this period, the best of your knowledge, let it not be data driven also. We can always, if you remember, where we talked about consumer insights before, saying have a hypothesis, then test it out in the market.
Correct.
So this is hypothesis, right? And we're saying that to the best of your abilities, we can always validate it later. But I want to have a conversation with you about your consumer and what are the top 10 things that matter to them when they're buying the category. How are they evaluating the category? For example, अगर आप घर देखने जाते हो, क्या देखते हो? आप देखते हो ना, ईस्ट फेसिंग होना चाहिए, सनलाइट अच्छी नहीं है कि नहीं है, वास्तु है, फिर वो किचन ओपन प्लान है कि कैसा है, वो एक्स्ट्रा बाथरूम है कि नहीं. These are category purchase drivers.
Right.
Locality, of course. So these are category purchase drivers. It doesn't mean, it's not like a Rustomji, Palonji, or a Lodha or any other builder ka. I'm not talking about those preferences. I'm talking about category mein importance kya hai customer ko. So in whatever category you operate, you please put down what are the top 10 most important things in reverse order, to the best of your abilities. So those become your roles. And on your columns, I'm saying just put down who is your source of growth. Where are you sourcing growth from, and how do your customers rate those brands on those parameters.
Correct.
Why is that important? Because your product differentiation will come from two factors. One is something that's important enough to the customer. I mean, if you're creating a product differentiation on the color of dog food, and that doesn't matter to the customer, then why even bother about it, right? If brown is good enough, then why even bother about it? Just by having pink dog food,
Correct.
it's not good. Consumer is not evaluating the category based on that. So it has to be important enough to the customer and not highly competed or not highly owned by one of your competitors or one of your source of growth. That is a market-wide space, because that category purchase attribute is important to the customer and not still taken by any of the competitors. So for that, even if it's a small set of early adopters, 10%, 15%, 12% of the market, for whom that's a very important category purchase attribute, and no other brand is solving it, it's a market-wide space. And that is the foundation on which you can build your brand. That's something that we work with our founders on, saying, listen, this is not, in our investor parlance, a CP. It is a CS, where we put in the money and say, okay, let's discover this together. And I think one of the things that's common in Fireside is all of us are very curious. We are very curious about customers. We love building consumer businesses, and we love the fact that we have the opportunity to work alongside the founders and decode consumers. So irrespective of who the founder is working with in my team, this is one common thing that they will encounter at some point of time. Because we're just curious, because even if that specific person on the deal may not be as curious, in 3 months within Fireside, we will be curious to know in the startup that she or he invested in, what's this chart looking like.
Right. And I think it's fair enough also, right? Because just a couple of weeks ago for something, we were just looking at consumption as part of India's GDP.
Right.
Among G20 countries.
Yeah.
So for US, it's around 70% of GDP is consumption. After that, in absolute value, it's India, which is around 60-65% as percentage of overall GDP. So we are largely a consumption-driven economy.
Yeah.
That also means we are more prone to demand shocks at a GDP level.
Yeah.
So anything which kind of shakes the consumption pattern also reflects in the GDP immediately, right? But if you look at consumption overall, let's look at everybody talks about this Bloom framework of India 1, 2, 3. How Sajid has divided this India 1 at the top and 2 and 3, right? You started your career in the hinterland when you were in the UP, when you mentioned that you were going through and then when I travel through tier 2 and tier 3 towns, I see this massive unlocking of demands. So people want to wear, maybe they're not wearing Comet, but they are buying sneakers, probably at a lower price point. So enormous potential for brands to be created across categories, right? That's my understanding when I interact. When I'm traveling, I always like to ask people, what are you watching on YouTube? What kind of apps you have on your phone? Just anybody you're sitting with, traveling on a train, just ask like, what are you watching, etc. So what are your takes from emerging India, basically, right? Especially from a consumption point of view, because you spend so much time thinking about white spaces, where new brands are going to emerge. India one is fairly easy to imagine, right?
Sure.
For example, yesterday I saw you back this Kusha Kapila's new creator-led brand, right? Which is, I think, similar to Kim Kardashian's brand. So it's mostly on a similar expectations of what is happening in the West. But if you travel outside tier 1 and metros, India is very different from, let's say, Southwest US or Ohio, Michigan, right? It's very different.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the trends which you observe are important and sort of emerging, or some green shoots which you see, which founders can capture on?
Yeah, I think, see, India too is an amazing brand opportunity. 100, depending on the report you read, 120, 150 million households, $2,500 to $4,000 of household income. In real terms, have anywhere between $500 to $2,000 of disposable income, which did not exist 10 years ago, right? And that's net new consumption that's getting added now over the next 5 to 7 years. So these are households where they were largely utilitarian in nature, and now for the first generation will be discretionary in nature, right? Couple that with the fact that at least if you future gaze about 5-7 years out, we will have 400 to 500 million internet shoppers in India. Today we have 150 to 200 million, depending on which report you read. So net new customers who didn't have more than utilitarian, pocket to spend, now shopping online, discovering brands online is a massive opportunity. But these customers are still new to discretionary consumption, as opposed to India 1, and therefore ask harder questions of their brands in terms of value delivered, right? And therefore, the question we ask when looking at India 2 is saying, so how are you delivering value? And because ultimately that question will come. We've talked about it, the shirt example, etc. And typically that lies either in product innovation, material innovation, or supply chain innovation. And that allows people to pass value down the chain. For example, we invested in a company called Frubon.
I know Frubon.
Yeah, you know Frubon. Have you tried the products?
I have not tried, but I know about it.
You live in Delhi. You should try and give us feedback.
Sure.
हम तो फाउंडर को बोल के थक गए कि आप बैंगलोर भी लॉन्च कर लो, क्योंकि हमें we have invested and we cannot make our friends and family try it, and he like पहले इधर की डिमांड तो खत्म करने दो मेरे को. And that's how deep the market can be, right?
Right.
He's talking about building a 1,000 crore brand just in Rajasthan, NCR, and West UP. That's it. He never has to go out of that. He like, boss, पहले ये तो खत्म कर लूँ मैं, उसके बाद आऊँगा बैंगलोर आराम से, right? So India too can be that massive an opportunity. Now there, what he's doing is he's done some supply chain innovation, technology in supply chain, how he collects milk. So that's why his cost of procurement of milk is one of the lowest in the country, because the density of procurement is higher. So using the same QCOM, food delivery, density equation reversed on collection.
Right.
That same model to reduce collection cost. And so that is one alpha he adds to the business. So he's able to pass value back. The second is in manufacturing, instead of dairy has fat and non-fat as two components, solid non-fat and fat. Fat typically ends up in butter, ghee, etc. He's saying ghee बेच के gross margin तो बनता नहीं है इंडिया में. So let me add some of that fat back to my core dairy products of paneer, ice cream, etc., which make it more creamier. Now that's a category attribute which we spoke about, which is important enough to the customer, not occupied as a positioning by any of the incumbent brands. And he's delivering that through core product innovation, right? By adding the fat back into paneer, he's making it softer. By the way, he spray dries the whey and adds whey back into the paneer to make high protein paneer for the people who like to work out and go to the gym. So he has options in paneer. In ice cream, he's adding the fat back to make it more creamier. So it's not like when you take it out of the freezer, it's not like your teeth are biting into the ice cream.
Right.
So core consumer value delivered through supply chain innovation, or in this case, both manufacturing and supply chain innovation. But in some cases, so that's what we're looking for, right? We're saying that there are so many categories. For example, spices. Now, what's happening is that young Gen Z India 2 is seeing its country cousins of India 1 having burgers and pizzas and pastas and all that, and saying, "Hame bhi khana hai."
Yeah.
But thoda Indian taste mein, cost mein, etc. But where are the brands that deliver oregano, peri peri, this chili flakes, etc. And I mean, you have Everest masala, you have MDH masala, but where are the brands for all of this? And this cuisine is coming home.
Yeah.
We can see it coming home for India too. But that requires another rethink of the supply chain for it. because you'll have to go down and integrate into the procurement of these spices and the processing of the spices to deliver it at a price point, cost, etc. that's logical for India too. So I think opportunities तो बहुत है. Beverages में opportunities है. For example, sugar obviously is enemy number one of everybody. But today, both Gen Z India 1 is asking for higher order benefits of fortification, of saying ki yaar, can I have prebiotics in my drink, etc. But the India 2 Gen Z is saying ki boss, can you deliver more energy to me? Can you deliver more protein to me in my beverages through whey, etc. whatever, right? The question really always is saying ki okay, you need a better product, you're willing to pay for it. So आप देखो, इंडिया हॉट कंट्री, जूते तो बहुत कम लोग पहनते हैं. इंडिया 2 में जाओगे तो इट बी लाइक 10% पेनिट्रेशन.
Yes.
90% is open footwear. Crocs is such a beautiful India product. They are priced at 3,000 rupees. It is unbelievable that India 2 can access it. But there are local brands like Bakabuki, Neiman's who are able to provide a Crocs-like product through material innovation at a price point that is about 800-900 rupees as opposed to a Relaxo Lakhani of 500-600. Now, with a 20-25% premium, you're getting a 10x better product. And that is what India 2 is looking for, right? So, I think the next wave of large brands will be very India 2. They have not come to the party yet.
Right, not even started.
No, it's just getting started, the party.
So, I wanted to ask you something about post-investment,
right?
When you deal with your portfolio companies, what are some of the tough situations which you have faced? Especially you have had multiple funds now. Any experiences post-investment?
Yeah, I think, COVID was a hard period for all of us, right? A lot of good founders just got caught in the wrong time. They had to significantly either pivot their business models, or they were just about at that end of their runway when they were going to get into market for a fundraise and COVID hit and capital markets just shut down, investors stopped investing. That was a very hard time, right? Like, how do you right size the company? We had to, in many cases, take that decision of letting go of people at a time when the employment market wasn't great.
Yeah.
So we knew what we were doing, but those are hard decisions. It's very hard. We obviously tried outplacing, doing all of those things, but there's only, I'm sure we didn't do 100% coverage there across all the portfolios, across all employees in those portfolios that got entrenched. And that was a hard period for us. I think in some cases, for example, innovative business models, capital became a kind of like a moat. And there were founders that were good founders building a very interesting business model, but their competitors came in and just raised piles of capital and just priced them out of the market. And in spite of all the doing the right things, the result for the founder was that after 4 or 5 years of her effort, I think she has very limited stuff to show for it. So that's always a hard decision. I mean, we've gone wrong with our assessment in many cases, like bunch of companies which we consider today are anti-portfolio. Those are hard decisions for us because they have proven us wrong. We had the opportunity to evaluate them, assess them, invest in them, perhaps. And we chose not to. And those businesses have gone on to become market-beating businesses. And I think we lost not only the opportunity to invest and obviously multiply our investment, but the opportunity to learn.
Can you talk about some which have become big?
There are a lot. So I don't want to miss out some. So. But yeah, I mean, Shibam is a great friend, but Atomberg was something we didn't end up investing in. Jiva, we didn't end up. Chaitanya, I love what he's building at Big Fit, but we just didn't have the conviction at that point. Family, Hapilo, a bunch of companies. Go Zero. Deep respect for the founders. Each of these founders is building, and I've not taken all names, by the way. We're also running, I'm cognizant of the time, but
Yeah.
great founders, and we just didn't have the conviction on what they're building, and they absolutely proved us wrong, right? And that those are hard lessons where we have to sit back, introspect, and say, what went wrong? Why couldn't we see it? And how can we do things differently going forward? And that's always hard.
Hmm. Once you are invested into a company, how do you decide you want to continue supporting them further in follow-up rounds or for bridge? I'm sure in some cases you also take a hard call. We are going to just sit out of the next round, or we're not going to continue supporting. So, what are some of those signals which you look for? Obviously, financial part is one, but what are the other things which you will look for?
Yeah, I think, see, the first check is more conviction based, where it is, you have an understanding of a space and you like a founder building in that space and you take a call. I think follow-on funding is more data driven, because now that we have invested in 54, consumer companies across 4 mega segments of BPC, F&B, home lifestyle, fashion, and health and wellness. There's some kind of pattern that is emerging, saying when a company is at 2 crores, what does it look like? When a company is at 5 crores, what does it look like? When a company is at 10 crores, what does it look like? In each of these segments. So apart from obviously the financials, unit economics, etc., what does it look like? We have a scorecard of 10 other parameters in the company that are important predictors that, potentially can, or not, I wouldn't call it predictors, I would say just good building blocks, right? So apart from the unit economics, like consumer love, right? What's the retention like? What's the referral rate like? What's the reviews? What's the rating? Then there is supply chain and cash management. How is the working capital management going? What is the supplier concentration risk? How have they managed, inventory and DOH, etc. Technology. What's the stack looking like? And other companies of the same scale, how are they managing marketing automation, creative development,
Right.
and 4-5 other technology items? Organization. What is their team looking like versus other companies at that same stage in that same segment? Looking at what we call channel discoverability, buyability, visibility. So, what is this up on Amazon? Are they discoverable? Are they competitive? And are they in the pricing band that is a sweet spot of conversion, or they're not? Again, relative to their source of growth. Many such parameters that that kind of give us comfort that the building blocks are coming together. Now, not all of it would be green, and we could still make that second check investment, but with our eyes open. But not having visibility into all this data, I think that is not a great fiduciary responsibility that we are doing with our LP's money. Given that now we have worked with the company for, let's say, a year and a half, we've also worked with 10 other companies in a similar space. We should be able to have a more data-driven discussion at that point.
Right. No, that's helpful. Any advice for early stage founders who are looking to get backed by a VC or looking to sort of turn around their lifestyle business into an investable business? Because a lot of consumer businesses I notice start as a lifestyle business. I want to do this, or I want to make this because this is my personal problem. Let's take anything, let's say personal care products or home care. They start as a personal problem statement usually. When I actually go down and ask why, and then it's like, no, I was facing this problem, and that's why I sat down and I just came up with this idea. So how do they what things they can do at very early stage to make it investable in future, let's say 1 year or 2 years from now, whenever they're starting with the consumer businesses? What are those pillars they can think about?
So I think, see, obviously, as a institutional VC, we would like to see some scale in the business potentially. If it's going to be a very boutique-y, very niche kind of business,
You mean the TAM has to be big enough?
some kind of TAM, right? Like, For example, see, we also backed Yoga Bar. Now they were selling protein and energy bars, and even the founder said like this: we know this TAM is small, but it is also noiseless. So let us enter the market through this, and then once we've built our distribution and equity, we will leverage that for getting into breakfast, etc. But if we start with breakfast, the Bagris, the Mohans, the Kellogg's of the world will blast us out of the market. And we said that makes sense, and we still back them. But if the vision itself is like very boutiquey, nichey, etc., then it's hard to back that vision. At least that vision should be of building something large or semi-large. Two is being very clear about your consumer. Who's your consumer and who's not your consumer? You know, your consumer can't be 25 to 35 internet buying audience. I mean, that cannot be your consumer. Or females between 25 and 35. That is the worst explanation of a consumer.
Worst TG.
Worst explanation. I mean, be just tell us who your consumer is. Be intimate with her or him if that's your target audience. And the closer you can get to that grid of product differentiation, the higher your chances are that VCs also see eye to eye with you. Because then they know that now this is a scalable proposition, or they can maybe not believe in that and give you straight feedback that this will not work. But either way, you get a very quick response, which actually is, as an entrepreneur, I know it's worth its weight in gold to get a quick response.
Yeah. Always. So thanks, Vinay. Thank you for coming out. I think it was really insightful, particularly around differentiation. I really like the way you described the grid. I think it's fairly simple to sit down and do this, but you can do it in few hours if you really know your consumer and your competition, and you can think about how to differentiate. So thank you, and hopefully listeners will find it useful for their venture building journey.
Thank you so much for having me over. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you.